And with that, we are back with another edition of Sunday Night AstroLive. I am your host for this evening. However, I will be joined by my good buddy Benito, aka Shadow, at about 7:15 here in the Central Time Zone, and we're gonna have a little interesting conversation about AI and astrology and where this is headed. I thought it would be a pretty timely topic of conversation, and he had done some excavating. I got my buttons all mixed up here. I'm well into my live stream, and fuck it. You don't know. If I didn't tell you, you probably wouldn't know. So I'm gonna let it go. Right. I'm gonna let it go. Anyway, my buddy Benito is going to be here at about 7:15, and he's done some really interesting work with Chat GPT and astrology. And he's uncovered rather, a company that seems to have partnered with Chat GPT to become essentially a virtual astrologer. I've used the program. It's pretty interactive. And when Benito comes on, we'll talk more about it. And I thought it would be interesting for us to discuss the future of astrology with the arrival of Pluto and Aquarius, because of course Aquarius rules astrology, in my estimation. Some people say Neptune rules astrology. I'm not so sure. I think it's astrology is very Uranian. It's very Uranian, right? It's like the messages are being poured out of the sky from the message bearer, right? Raining down upon us. And it is theoretically a new medium, although it's been around for a long time. We'd like to think it's new. It certainly has seen a resurgence over the last 5 to 6 years. I mean, the astrology is through the roof now, in terms of popularity, in terms of people who are becoming astrologers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're going to be looking at the next wave of astrology and kind of going through this one company that has planted its flag in the astrological realm. But before I do that, let me acknowledge everybody, or at least as many people who have shown up here. Let me acknowledge you tonight, because it's always an amazing thing for me to press this button and for people to show up and be here and part of this experience. So who do we have here? There's my good man, my buddy, DJ MC. What's going on? So, Michael, you're going to have to take Al under your wing as he trains to attempt to keep his skull from being crushed by Joe Rogan. Meow Meow is here. What's going on, Meow Meow? Cato, hi. Hi back. Here's my man, Ryan, the introspective woodworker and the head of the International Introspective Woodworkers Union of the World. Yes, I know it's a mouthful, but very quietly, silently, they do incredible work behind the scenes. Integrity and Karma is here, checking in with us. How about that? Dorian McLean. Hello, Dorian. Veronica's Barn. Do a little name check. Road Trip 1981. What's up, Road Trip? Let's see. Who else do we have? Melissa Stanton. She's with us tonight. Okay, who else do we have? T. Jordan. There's my man, Tom. What's going on, brother Tom? Christine Mose. Hello, Christine. Good to see you. Let's see who else. A cool picture. Is that on the thumbnail? Yep. That's a little AI creation. I found, the thing about it using AI is, first of all, I don't pay for it, but there are paid programs that give you more flexibility, scalability, you can do a bunch more stuff. But it felt like that was kind of capturing the spirit. That was me fucking around with about 20 different versions, maybe even more, of an image that I wanted to use for a thumbnail. And I felt like that kind of captured the spirit of what we were talking about here, which is this kind of this virtual muse in some ways, right? this digital oracle, and it seemed to have all the cybernetic connections. Peter Bio, what's up, brother? Good to see you. Sandra Jackshaw checking in from Massachusetts. There she is, the lovely and talented one, the doctor, the good doctor, Joan S. She's here. Scott A. and hi, Scott. Hello to you. Jay, Pluto, and Aqua. Here we go. Cheers to it. That's right, Jelena. It's a big splash, isn't it? Arlene Vega, greetings back. Jackie Delario. Hello, Jackie. Good evening. These are the voyages in the quantum vortex. Greetings from Shelburne. Greetings back at you. Man, we are in for it, aren't we? I'm looking forward to it. It's like, let's get weird. Let's get really fucking weird. Vince Duggar, hey, what's going on, Vince? Good to see you. I hope you are. I guess it was raining a lot yesterday in the San Francisco Bay Area. The 49ers were playing in a downpour. And Brock Purdy, oh my God, he couldn't throw a wet football, man. He was having a hard time. Brock's got Mars and Aquarius. So he has some weird tics, right? Like physically, like he's got this weird thing with throwing a football in the rain. And he did this thing where he held the ball in one hand and he dried his other hand off so he could throw the fucking football. I've never seen that before. Gucci to Ghost, what's going on, Jake? Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Jake's our we got a lot of authors in here, but Jake's got her hooves in the literary world, talking about her journey from basically marketing, PR, fast track, business, and then buying a farm and teaching herself all about animals and livestock and goats. It's a really great story. Let's see, who else do we have here? Peter says, looks like Ebola is in our near future. Word is lawyers will become obsolete. Well, that's a really interesting comment. If lawyers become obsolete, judges aren't far behind. Think about that. Think about AI as a virtual judge. Could happen. Could definitely happen. Let's see, who else do we have? Listen to David's most recent video about the AI situation, adapt or die. I think there's some truth to it, although David seems to be quite extreme sometimes in his pronunciations of things. There are some people who will not adapt and they will not die. Trust me. There are plenty of people like the Tuareg people, of Northern Africa will not adapt to AI. And they won't die. They've been around for a long time. They're indigenous cultures that don't give a shit, will never give a shit about AI, and they'll be fine. They will be fine. Other people, perhaps in the workplace, I don't think the Amish need AI. Do you? I don't think so. I think they've been just fine with that AI. But perhaps people in the workplace and using commerce, that's a whole nother discussion. It's all reindeer games to me. All right, who else do you have? Manice Phoenix. What's going on, Manice? Love you guys. Astro fam. What's going on, fam? You guys are like a fam. Let's see who else. Esperanza Vince Tarot. Good to see you. Hey, we got an Amy Simon. Cheeky Monkey. She's here. Yes, please hit the like button. Thank you for reminding me, Ryan. Hit the like button. Hit the like button if you like what you're hearing here tonight. Hit subscribe. Hit the notification for the bell. We're here right around 6:30 on Sunday nights, anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, talking about astrology, like what's in the air, what's happening with the planets, what's happening with trends, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're new, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the program. And do not hesitate. Hit subscribe. Leela, what's happening, Leela? Good to see you. Cynthia Cluth is here. The Nutcase Network. I love it. What's up, Nutcase? Good to see you. Welcome. Harun. It's Elizabeth from Kyoto. Hey, it's Elspeth. Oh, it's Elspeth. Hi, Elspeth. From Kyoto. We got Kyoto checking in. Love being here. I learned so much. Y'all keep me saying good. Yeah, we got a good crew here. Elizabeth Bryan is here. Esther Swift. I think this might be the app in the Google store, but not for iOS yet. Francine W. Hello, Francine. Caught Alive. Yes, we're glad you're here too. Big Sky. What's happening, Big Sky? Secret Law 2007. Mika with the pink hand wave. We got Chris B. Georgia Kapoulis. How'd I do with that? Chris B. Georgia Kapoulis from New York City. Welcome, Chris B. Harry Bowie. Hey. Justin Zagarella. Getting a shout out to Shadow. How about that? He's not even here yet. Ping-a-ling ding. Hi, Ping-a-ling ding. There's Nora Rashid. She's in and out with me. I'm competing with the Bills Chiefs game. Nora will join us tomorrow night on Sirius Sports, of course, as a member of the chat, but a very informed and active member of the chat. Curtis Moonflower. What's going on, Curtis? Scarab City from London. London calling. Just had an argument with the parental unit. What do we have here? Was it Strange Energy today? Greetings from San Francisco. Yeah, boy. What entanglements we have with our parents, huh? What a trippy concept. We got Claire checking in from, I believe, Scotland. So we've got London and Scotland and Kyoto, all over the place. Autumn Marlene, Eagle Shield co-star. Are you talking about Jasper? He's not here right now. Jasper's kicking it in the living room watching the Bills game. Oh, Sazules, what's happening? William Pals. William's here, Sun in Scorpio 71. Saying hi from Minnesota. Stay warm up there. Let's see who else. I saw a really cool Jesus AI video. Can now find it now. Very psychedelic. Man, I'm telling you, it's going to get weird. It is going to get weird. Linda L. I enjoy the personal stories you shared in a recent interview. Nice interviewer. Yeah, I think JJ did a really good job. She's a good listener, for sure. It was a different kind of interview, not very conceptual. Kabuki Theater, what's going on, Bo? What's happening, brother? Misbehaving too? Well, she stopped by my house uninvited. Husband said she needs to call first. If you're a projector and somebody stops by your house uninvited, it's not a good thing. It is not a good thing. As a projector, I've always bristled when the uninvited show up. I'm sorry, it's always been that way. So if you CR user, if you're a projector, I can relate to that. And if you're not, as a projector, I can still relate to it. Diane Evans is here. What's going on, Diane? No one you know. Hello, no one you know. Sandy D. Hello, Sandy D. CC99. We are live, CC99, and I'm here to remind you of that because I just said your name. Shirley Lochavo checking in from the Chesapeake Bay area. Bo Williams is here. Hello, Bo. We like weird because I know this is great, right? This is the 11th house ruled by Aquarius. This is what it's all about. Right here. Glemma Spank. What's going on, Glemma? Let's see. Who else do we have? Anybody new? Scuba Kel's here. Hello. Hi, Scuba Kel. Still haven't forgotten about sending the recordings. I keep reminding myself. Maya Rose. Maya, we're gonna get back to you. I gotta get back to you. I got some thought to put into your situation, Maya. This is the week. Let's see who else we have. Autumn Marlene Eagle Shield, Pluto sextile my natal in Sag. Oh, so we got a Gen Z with a Pluto sextile. A lot of a lot of Gen Z people now are going to start to get this Pluto sextile with their natal Pluto. Man, it is going to get lit for Gen Z. I'm telling you, it is going to get totally lit. On the other hand, millennials, Pluto is going to start to square your Pluto. So it's going to be very interesting watching the development here between these two generations. I think for the millennials, and especially we're talking older millennials now, so we're going back to what, like 1985, 1986, right around there, right? So what we're kind of getting into like the late 30s, right? Late 30s. And those millennials are going to have a very interesting relationship with Pluto as they move into their 40s. You know, the whole Pluto effect is going to become visceral, right? Like, wow, shit, I'm 40 years old now. See, that's what Pluto does, right? It fucking slaps you in the face, says, you know what, you're not a kid anymore. What are you going to do with the rest of your life force? And I think, I do think at a certain core level, millennials do like a challenge. You know, Pluto and Scorpio has to, you know, kind of hit the wall in a lot of ways, right? Eventually it does. Eventually it does. So this is going to be very interesting watching, you know, how we have that, you know, first wave of millennials with the Pluto square. And with Gen Z, what Autumn was talking about, that Pluto sextile, and how it generationally, right, there are these sort of crustal shifts, right? So and as Pluto starts to move through Aquarius, you know, over time, it'll start to square deeper and deeper into the millennial generation, and then it will continue to sextile off into the Gen Z. So one group is going to have sort of this cultural crossroads in a lot of ways, right? Because really, we're talking about 39, 40 years old, you know, these, and again, the millennials from around that time. Some people think the millennials start around 83, 84, right? I mean, we still have some vestiges of Pluto and Libra during that time. And for me, it really starts like Pluto and Scorpio. It's almost like a hard stop. I mean, because you're dealing with Scorpio. It's like, this is it. You know, and other signs, I think there can be some wiggle room, some waggle room. But with Scorpio, there really is a kind of a definitive sort of boundary, right? Like there's life and there's death with Scorpio. So Pluto and Scorpio, for me, really starts around 1985. And so they're coming up now on turning 40. That's going to be super interesting. So the early Gen Zers show up around 1996, and they're going to be closing in on 30, right? So they're coming in for their start of their Saturn returns, and this is the first wave of Gen Z. So it's going to be interesting watching how these generations adapt to Pluto. Now we'll go back a couple generations and we'll go to the boomers. Now the boomers are going to start to go through the Pluto opposition, and the first wave of boomers shows up around, I think, what, 1940. I think the first Pluto and Leo shows up around 1940, right around there, 39, 40. I think at the end of 39, beginning of 40. But it really doesn't sort of kick in until about 1942. And then the post-World War II boomers show up, start around 19, in a big way. Men are coming home from the war, 1946, 1947. And there's a lot of baby making going on, right? So it's going to take a while for Pluto to kind of catch up with the bulk of the boomers, who are really, the bulk of them are really born 46, 44, 46 till about, I would say. And again, I'm Pluto and Virgo. I don't really see myself as a boomer, because I didn't grow up in the 50s, right? By the time the boomers reach sort of the you know, that kind of interesting period where you're kind of becoming aware of yourself as an entity, like late teens, right around 16, 17 years old. A lot of those boomers, by the time the 60s roll around, if you're born in 1947, you're 20 years old. I was 7. So you're coming of age during the 1960s. Even if you're born, a little bit later than that, 48, 49, 50, you're still a teenager, 7 fucking years old. So it's a big gap between, and being raised in the 50s is a lot different than being raised in the 60s. I can assure you. So the boomers are going to start to have this Pluto opposition. When you get into the Pluto opposition, if you get through the Pluto opposition in your chart, which happens around, I think it's around 86, 85, 86, right around there. You get through that Pluto opposition, it's a good chance you'll live well into your 90s. So the boomers are going to start to feel Pluto in opposition. Now, of course, we have that little brief refrain that starts later this year, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in October, with Pluto retrograding back into Capricorn. But this is pretty much it now, other than that brief refrain. I think it's about 3 months or something like that. We're pretty much here. Right? It's almost like it just drops out just in time for the election. And then once the election happens, again, I think it's in December, it moves forward, and now we're definitely in Pluto and Aquarius country. So it's going to be interesting to watch how Pluto affects all these various generations. And I think as far as Gen X goes, you're going to have, again, that Pluto sextile to their Pluto, which is in Leo. So I would say that Gen X and Gen Z are going to have the harmonic relationship with Pluto. And then the millennials, who are known as Gen Y, and the boomers will have the dissonant relationship with Pluto. And it's interesting because the boomers begat Gen X. And my generation, which I like to, I think there's a name for it called Generation Jones. We were the original Generation Zero. That my generation begat the millennials. I was late to the game. I've got a Gen Z kid. So it's going to be interesting watching Pluto, and it feels to me like, and I've talked about this before, that with Gen X, with Pluto coming in and not just sextiling trining their natal Pluto, which is in Libra, so air to air, sextiling their natal Neptune, which is in Sagittarius. And that'll be really interesting for them, right? I've always felt, and I've talked about this before, that there's this underlying spiritual kind of content or wave with Gen X, with that Neptune in Sagittarius, which is exalted. Neptune's exalted in Sagittarius. So if we look at the Gen X, and again, I feel really that Gen X starts to show up sometime in the late 60s, even though Pluto was in Virgo during that time. And I've done the math on this. Right, so let's say you're born in 1968, okay, and you were 12 years old. Or if you're born in 1968, you had 12 years in 1968, it would be 1980. You'd be 12 years old, coming of age in the 80s. And I think Gen X comes of age in the 80s. They're the 80s kids. So I think it's a very, you've got all your high school years ahead of you if you're born in 1968, right? So and whoever comes after that is also, having some relationship with the 1980s as well. And just like it's also quite interesting in that there are different kinds of like gradations with certain groups. I'll give you an example. So if you go back and look at people born in like 1969, 68, 69, they still get a little bit of that Neptune and Scorpio. 67, 68, 69, little Neptune and Scorpio. But they're different than kind of the older group from, say, the late 50s that has Neptune and Scorpio. They're a lot different, I think. Because I feel like that some of when was Kurt Cobain born? Because I think he's a really good kind of cipher. 1967. So that's what I'm talking about, right? And because Neptune in Scorpio is all about addiction, all about drugs, sort of this underlying deep, narcosis and sadness, and this kind of deep maudlin kind of territory, right? So the people who are born in sort of that particular time of Neptune and Scorpio are different than me, who was born in 1960 with Neptune and Scorpio. And those guys, are kind of the first wave of like grunge and stuff like that too, right? So, and people would say, well, Kurt Cobain's a millennial. I'm not a millennial. Gen X. They would say he was Gen X. Right? He's kind of a Gen X hero in a lot of ways. And when I think of Gen X, what do I think of? I think of with the John Hughes movie. Oh man, I get my John Hughes Breakfast Club. I think of the Breakfast Club. To me, the Breakfast Club is the epitome of that's Gen X's movie, is the Breakfast Club. That is their movie. The movie for my generation is Dazed and Confused by Richard Linklater. The movie for the millennials, the boomers, I'm getting my generation all fucked up. For the boomers is American Graffiti. These are all about coming of age films, right? And I'm trying to think of what would be the coming of age movie for the millennials. Would it be like Mallrats or Clerks or something like that? Would they fit into that category? Would that still be considered Gen X? Anyway, Pluto is going to have an interesting effect on all of us and society at large. It's going to change everything. It's going to be a major, major game changer. And some of it, I mean, just go look at last week. We had the World Economic Forum, right? And just what a bunch of fucking weirdos. I mean, look, I think there's like good weird and bad weird. I'd like to think we're good weird. I'd like to think that they're bad weird. And then there's unintentional comedy weird, which, I mean, they're a bunch of fucking nerds, right? They're a bunch of nerds. They're a bunch of people that are geeks. They kind of got left behind, or they have some kind of attachment to some form of weird transcontinental, I don't know, fealty to Europe and this European tradition, right? Which in many ways, at this stage of the game, seems a little bloodless on a certain level. I'm not saying historically or culturally, just at this certain level. And then there's this one guy, there's the guy who's supposed to be there, right? Like shouting down Klaus Schwab, and he gets carried. It's all fucking AI, right? But the weird part about it is that it's almost as effective as if he was there. I mean, this is Pluto and Aquarius. And keep in mind, we're going to have Uranus and Gemini. So a lot of this stuff is going to get really layered and super confusing and just filled with all kinds of high strange. Like that guy didn't even have to be there. But the technology has gotten to the place where he could do that. And not only that, but follow it up with like another video where he had a black eye and he did the same thing and he was going to apologize. I mean, you know, this is where things are going to get interesting because people are going to get some of these tools and they're going to break the system. Like it's just as effective as if he was there, because for all intents and purposes, it looked like he was there. The kids talking about speaking things into existence. That's exactly kind of what was going on there, speaking that into existence. And then, because this has been a really interesting time. I mean, not just Pluto and Aquarius, but we've had the sun like right on top of Pluto, right in the last days of Capricorn. And man, so much shit was illuminated during that time. Like so much came up during that time. Like in this last week, where we talked about how this would be the effect of the sun with Pluto and illuminating the darkness. And it's just starting, right? Like, because they're kind of moving together, they're moving together. The sun is illuminating, this interesting Plutonian underworld. And it started with the whole like tunnel thing in New York City and what was going on with that and Chabad. And the other thing too, this is a really important part that doesn't get talked about enough because it's a really difficult part to talk about. Just look at what's going on in Gaza. And it's brutal, right? It is brutal. They basically have leveled the place to the point where it's not even livable and nobody wants to rebuild it. And seeing uncut footage of what's gone on there has been darkly illuminating, right? And then you have Netanyahu essentially saying, hey, look, this place is ours from the river to the sea. He said that in a speech. And that has always been kind of the off limits territory as to how far, that they would push their idea of greater Israel, right? And now people are seeing this. You think about, I think about the people, not often, but I do. I think about the people that are going through what they're going through with Gaza and the loss of life and the extreme. It's really extreme and ugly and dark. And in a lot of ways, the sacrifice that they're making for humanity, to me, it's very Plutonian. I mean, at some point, right? At some point, we're not about looking backwards to something like the Holocaust, because the Holocaust is all around us at this point. It's all happening, right? It's all happening now. And there are people who are essentially, human sacrifice. Human sacrifice for some version of the new world. But what they're doing is through their death, right? They're waking people up. People are seeing this. I mean, this is in some ways the greatest sacrifice that a human could make. Like now we're in the sort of description of martyrs and saints. And to be honest, it would be an absolute utter shame for them to lose their lives and to not have anything come out of it. This is the type of scenario that we're talking about here. I mean, it is incredibly illuminating and dark. Whatever your position is on who said what, who did what, how long it's been going on, when you see the stark reality of what's taking place, it's not just about removing the threat. It's about something much deeper and much darker. And I wonder how much more darkness can humanity take? Who knows? We may find out. We may find that we have an unlimited potential for darkness. Where's the line? And at what point do we say enough is enough? No more of this bullshit. I think it's coming. And just this last couple of weeks alone, I'd say the last 10 days, with that sun coming in, sitting right on top of Pluto, and I mean, and even stupid shit, right? Like, Nikki Haley, who happens to be, I think she's an Aquarian. I think she's an Aquarian. She could be like the final degree and minute of Capricorn, But if you put her chart at Leo rising, she's an Aquarius on her birthday, which just happened. And even the Nikki Haley stuff, right? Like the stories about her banging all these guys. She seems like somebody who would do that. But that, that's been out for a while. They brought that up when she was running for governor of South Carolina. So Nikki Haley has a bit of a checkered past. Who knows? Maybe her husband's into it. Who knows? Maybe he knows. I mean, clearly it happened in the past. It's already been unearthed. He knows about it. He's still with her, right? So who knows what kind of arrangement they have. But again, it's one of those things, right? Oh, look, Nikki Haley, she fucked all these dudes and she was married and she's still married to her husband. And do you want to cuck as the first man, right? I don't know. We probably already have. Well, we don't have one. Well, that's a different topic. But yeah, that's another example of this light coming in and shining on a particular situation. And it's just started. I mean, we can even go back to like the Cat Williams stuff on Shannon Sharp. And there are all these other people that are chiming in saying 2024 is the year of truth. 2024 is the year of truth. 2024 is the year things are going to be revealed. And I think that there's some truth to that. And I think that when you look at that transit where Pluto and the sun are hanging out together, and it is all about illumination and shining light in the darkness. And even in our own lives, we all think it's out there, and a lot of it will be out there because Aquarius is a collective sign. But wherever Aquarius shows up in your chart, that's where a lot of the unearthing will take place for you as an individual. And you're like, fuck, haven't I had enough unearthing? I've spent the last 3 years. Well, maybe you have. And maybe at this point, it's more about accepting who you are, where you are, in that kind of Aquarian way where you're like, I don't give a fuck. Right? I'm just going to be authentic. I'm just going to be authentic and let the chips fall where they may. So we're going to get into a bit more of that after Benito, aka Shadow, shows up. He'll be here in about 5 minutes or so. So let me give you what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the groundwork a little bit for what we're going to talk about when he gets here. So let me do this. Let me show you guys. So this is a website that has theoretically licensed ChatGPT, although they also claim to have developed their own AI when it comes to astrology. So it's called Authority Astrology. And it's a pretty impersonal site. It looks like somebody created this site who is a marketing person, right? There's like zero human touch, even to the site, right? Like it's just all very kind of synthetic. Although Judith Fuller really liked it. Apparently, it's been featured on OpenAI, Bustle, Popular Science, and Odyssey. So Benito brought this to my attention. And this site is going to be the jumping off point for our discussion. And I felt like it was really interesting that they chose the word authority in front of astrology. I think it's very clever. And we're going to find out as Benito brings back the receipts from, when this company was started and all the other stuff go along with it. and possibly how long they've had this name. But they're establishing this website as the authority in astrology. See what they're doing there? Authority astrology. And we're going to get into, who's behind this website. The person that seems to be I wouldn't say the figurehead, but I guess they're like one of the co-creators, or I guess I'll use the word CEO for lack of a better term, because we're not quite sure. But it's somebody who is an actual person who is attached to this website in a way where if you want to get in touch or contact this website, this is who you talk to. Because apparently she's one of the architects or one of the people that are behind it. So we're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into like what I would call the chain of custody around this company, and we're also going to explore a little bit about. Now, I'm not promoting it, right? I'm not promoting it. So, but if you want to, go use it, right? And I know some of you who are curious. I used it. Some of you are curious, like myself. I found that it was like very basic description. I typed in my midheaven. Of course, once you type in your date of birth, time, place, they know what your midheaven. They do your entire chart, and then you can interact with the AI and ask the AI questions. Well, what did I ask? What profession is best for me? And it was really basic and fundamental astrology. Like if you kind of do astrological math, well, you got a little Libra here, you got a little Virgo here, you got a little Jupiter and Sagittarius here. Let's mix it up and then we'll come up with a list of things that this person might be good at, right? And there's some truth to that, but there also isn't a lot of nuance. And this is where, when you work with an astrologer, a good astrologer, the nuance is important. Because anybody could go in and say, well, this is this, and this is this, and this is this, and it all kind of adds up. And there can be some truth to that. I can't tell you how many people who have strong Cancer influences in their chart that I've been able to pinpoint, oh yeah, accounting, bookkeeping, hospitality, right? I mean, you understand sort of the lay of the land. And then you start to put things together. But it's the human touch that allows the experience to go 2 or 3 levels deeper. Now, we're going to get into some of the philosophical stuff once he shows up, because I think that's still important. But if you wanted to, you could pay $97 forever. $97, and you get access to the site for the rest of your life, right? And there are people who will do that because you can go in and you can ask all these questions about timing, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about not only how this site is created, which astrologers have influenced the site, and then how it, not just this site alone, but how this site and others may also influence human behavior as a result of how the information is shared. The great Marshall McLuhan once said, the media is the message. And as we move into AI, that is a very, very unusual media. And with it, an unusual message. But at the heart of it is synthetic. And the message itself may be just as synthetic. All right, let's see if our guy is here. Let's see what we got here. Let's do the stop share. All right, we'll just hang in there. What do you guys think of AI? What do you think of AI with astrology? Is there a future? Is there a future with AI and astrology? I think at a basic and fundamental, the answer to that would be yes. Yes, I think there is. But when it comes to nuance, at least for now, no. No. We got no. CC99 says no. Jeff Rosen, of course, says yes. Christine, no. TJ, no. Claire can't stand it. It's creepy. Cat's Pajamas says yes. It beats newspaper horoscopes. Astro 24 Motion Over says no, not human. Still limited as programming. I'm sticking with the books. You guys are great. I mean, I'm with you, right? I'm with you. That said, it has a future. It may not have a future that we agree on, that we resonate with, but I guarantee you there are going to be people that will. So here we go. Let's bring in Benito. What's going on, Shadow Man?
How are you, sir?
I'm good. Did you hear my intro at all?
Yes, sir.
So let's get into this a little bit. How did you run across this site?
So I've been using ChatGPT since November, just as a creative thing, looking into the whole art generation and all that. And so been using it for 2 months, and I laid off on it for a little bit. And then this was for about the last 2-3 weeks. But then I revisited a few days ago and found out that there's a tool, and its tools have already been involved with ChatGPT. Like you can go and find Santa Claus. There's a Santa Claus AI for that, so you can talk to that. They have all these little different things in it. And so here recently, I found they have an astrology AI tool. I've never seen that before. So I got curious and wanted to go check out what it's all about, and found some anomalies with it, and I just kept digging. And I wanted to see if it was accurate. So I did give it my data, and you can talk to it, and sure enough, it will feed you more or less correct data about you. And you have to know, for what they have built so far, you have to know astrology in order to get more depth out of it too.
Right.
So you have to know your aspects, and you have to know your positions to get more out of it. But it does have a pretty good idea about who you are when you ask it, when you feed it this data. And
right.
the astrology, the authority astrology comes from, so when you input this data, ChatGPT doesn't actually have it. They have to do a digital handshake. So basically send your data to a third party, which would be this site, and then they feed it back to ChatGPT. So that's how this site comes into play. And this site also has its own AI. You can go download an app for it. So I found all this out, and that site, I believe, I have the source for it, but it talked about it was online November 27th of last year. And then ChatGPT started using this site, and I would imagine this is when the AI came into play back on December 29th of last year. That's why I probably didn't see it those first 2 months. So it's a brand new tool for them.
So I apologize. I probably didn't give you a good enough introduction. Let me do that a little bit. Let's step back because there's some questions I want to ask you about what we already talked about, which you'll bring up here. Anyway, for those of you that don't know, Benito, I guess I've known you for how many years now? About 4 years, is that right?
Probably, yeah, since 21, so 3 years.
3 years, right? 3 years. So Benito came over to my house one day in Fredericksburg with his buddy, and his buddy had reached out to me, said, "Hey, I'm here with my friend up in Dallas. We want to come visit you. Would you be open to hanging out with us?" I'm like, "Sure, why not? Yeah, no problem. Come by." So I'd forgotten you guys were coming, and I'm sitting down in my office, which was, I had a window that looked out on the street, and this car comes up, and I see these two dudes get out of this car. I'm like, who the fuck are these guys? Right? And Benito was all in black, and Justin was like, he was all, I was like, man, these guys look rough. These are those dudes that are supposed to come down here. So anyway, they come up, I let them in, and we start talking astrology. I, bring up my computer, look at charts, and then I think we went to the city hall meeting, or like the alternate city hall meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Benito had no real clue about astrology, or he did maybe a little, but not much. And from that period, when I first met him, to where we are now, he's gotten so fucking good at astrology that he's just, a real adept, and really is, he's got tons of Scorpio in his chart and is a great researcher, which you're going to find out here. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of give people some context about how we know each other, and just the absolute rocket ride I've seen with your astrological knowledge and acceleration. So there we go. So I want to bring everybody up to present.
I appreciate it.
So you found this site, and you sent me kind of a cookie crumb about this site. And let me see if this is it here. Let's see. I've got all these fucking text docs. I'm like, what is the process? Yeah. So this is it. So Chat GPT. Okay. Astrology. Okay. All right. So this is where the cookie crumb trail goes. So if you go to that website, you drop down, this is authorityastrology.com. You drop down into another company. So these are shell companies. You drop down into another company called Delexa Limited Collection. It's an LLC, and it's in Deerfield, Illinois, Waukegan Road, #707. For all we know, that #707 could just be like a PO box or something like that, right?
Right.
It doesn't even have to be a physical address. I would doubt that it is. And then when you Google that, it takes you to DelexaLimited.com. And at the bottom of that page, it takes you to a completely different address, right? You want to tell them where it takes people?
Yeah. So when you go to that site is very basic. Delexa Limited, to whoever, how do you get in touch with this Authority Astrology? Very basic website. So all you have to do is scroll to the bottom, not much there, and it gives you an address to Hong Kong.
Right. 87-105 Chatham Road South, Beverly Commercial Center, room 9, 4th floor. 4th floor, Sim Sha, Sui, Hong Kong. All right. So then you Google that, and then where does it take you?
Takes you to another corporation called BBC Incorp, offshore, also located in the same place of the Delexa Limited. Same for everything in Hong Kong.
Right. So then you go to the base site, and then you get bbcincorp.com/HK.
Right.
And then you put that in, and then where does it take you?
So when you input that corporation into Google, it'll take you, you have to scroll through it to find it, but you can find it through a Google search, Behance, which seems to be an advertisement company.
Right. Right. And then Behance has been around since 2007. And then they have connections with somebody named Dave McClure, and of course, Jeff Bezos. Right. So we went into Behance, and Behance was one of these companies that it was just like there was so much stupid .com money around during that time. This was around 2009, 2010. And they got some seed money from people like, I think, Peter Thiel, who else? Jack Dorsey, Andreessen Associates, the venture capital people in the Bay Area. And it was just a weird company. They were like they were serving banner ads, right? I mean, they have like job postings.
Right.
I think they got 500,000 in initial seed money, and then they got I think 6 million, and then they were bought by Adobe for like 150 million, right?
Right. Right. So that's who runs Behance now, is Adobe.
Right.
That's where we found the link with Dave McClure and Jeff Bezos, because they bought into all that. They did the startup for all that.
Right. So if we look at sort of the trail with this authority astrology, basically has an anchor inside the U.S. with a P.O. box. I think it's a P.O. box. I'm going to say it's a P.O. box in Deerfield, Illinois, right? The Delexa Limited. But then you have this company in Hong Kong. Now, there's a reason why it has an address in the U.S., and it's because the Chinese can't do business in this way in this country, correct? Right?
Right.
So we're looking at a whole series of shell companies here, which is not unusual in some ways, but it's almost like they're kind of trying to smooth their tracks over so that the Chinese thing doesn't come up. That's number one. But number two, I think it's also just a lot easier to find legal loopholes and move money around. And this is just one of thousands of websites and services that have this kind of stacking going on with all these companies. So what are your thoughts here? Because you've kind of dug into it. You got a bit of the Delaware piece too. So what are your thoughts on just the kind of corporate genesis of what they're serving up to us for astrology and AI?
Well, like you said, it goes to loopholes, right? So like the Delaware piece you mentioned, for those that don't know, apparently Delaware is the only state to where you don't have to announce who owns your company. Hence why you can set up so many shell companies and why there's a lot of big things going on politically with that. And you can go find on the net, it doesn't take long for you to search this, but they say the top 3 most corrupted places on earth in this order: Singapore, Hong Kong, and Delaware. And this site that's linked to ChatGPT, if you go look at the privacy policy of the site, tells you they're based in Delaware. So what does that mean corporately? Well, if they're setting up all these shell companies, I think it's bigger, right? Like, as you said, that they've got China, who supposedly can't do business here. And then they're not, if you go to OpenAI, you find out that the Chinese don't have access to this technology, right? But now here's an into this technology using a third-party site, but using a US-based company, but
Right.
still owned by them. So now they can somehow have a backdoor into this technology, or they have access to it at some point. So maybe that's what, I would imagine all corporations have a hand in each other's pockets. They're all in bed with each other in some form or fashion. And so with loopholes, I would imagine this is how they can do it, because it is legal according to pen and paper. So nothing's going to stop them from doing it. And, you scratch my back, we'll scratch yours. Like Behance, right? It's just advertisement. There's not a very direct link to BBC and I in court, but they do advertise for them. They are owned by Adobe, and they have had this money moved around to start them up to advertise for them. And they are linked to Bezos and all these other important people, or big people, I should say. And, wallets run deep. So I would imagine everybody wants a piece of the technology. Everybody wants a piece of the pie. Maybe it's not about power and money anymore. It's about the technology.
Right.
And maybe that could be a lead into this age of Aquarius with Pluto hitting 0 degrees, right?
Well, what's interesting is Pluto is resources too, and other people's money, right? So this brings up a very interesting question about, who's behind it, who profits from it, where the money is coming from, and, all the other kind of attendant questions, where if you look at a company, usually you have a board of directors, or, there's more transparency. with this, there's only one person that we've been able to find, and
Right.
that's Jennifer Foster, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
And that,
Jennifer Foster is sort of the nominal face of this company, and what I find interesting is that I think we can agree that she's not an astrologer.
right.
Yeah.
The way they present it to her, and then we find out she's really into the HR side of things, and that's where she's been. You can find her, and she's for Authority Astrology, so that's the face of that company. But
Right.
she's into a lot of HR, and she shows up in Forbes, right? She shows up in a number of other different publications, but it's all HR related. Like you said, seems like she's not into even astrology. She's just the mover and shaker, the money handler. But it says that
Yeah.
she's the lead director for the editorial section.
Yeah.
Or the editorial manager is what she is.
Right. Editorial manager. Yeah. And then there's this thing with Forbes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here are 3 common misconceptions about HR, and she's in this one. See if I can pull it up here. And by the way, it doesn't mean that you don't have to know anything about astrology to start a company, but I do think the roots of something are important. So this is the Forbes article. I guess she's mentioned in here, right? So aside from providing coaching, recommendations to support, HR is also there to ensure employees being treated fairly. Jennifer Foster, managing editor for Authority Astrology, explained. When an employee raises a problem such as blah 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 blah, she doesn't have employees, just fucking AI. And like she can manage the AI. That's the easiest HR job on the planet.
Right.
And she shows up in all these other kind of like industry sort of publications and these industry articles. It feels like she has she'll tell you she's a Libra.
Right.
And she likes sunsets or sunrises in nature. And here we go. Again, this is weird too. This is another article that she's featured in, which is tips from experts to overcome insurance claims, management challenges, right? And then she's right there, right at the top. Jennifer Foster, managing editor and life relationship coach, Authority Astrology. And it's like she's in here with these other people who have nothing to do. And again, you don't necessarily have to do anything with astrology, but there's like Filter Smart, Field Pros Direct, Claim. This is all insurance fucking HR shit, right? Mortgage broker, founder, CLO, online degree, and outsource insurance claim collection. And then you have managing editor, life relationship coach, Authority Astrology. Don't you think it's weird?
Oh yeah, totally. It's very strange. And even the site itself, when I found out, it supposedly got launched in November, so it's in its infancy, this website, but there's really nothing about it. They're not telling you who's involved with it, because that site it claims she's the head, she's the captain of the love boat, is like quoted in that site for who she's running, of a bunch of astrology enthusiasts of who run this site, but who has it, who runs it, who programmed it, and they're hand in hand with ChatGPT now, which is new.
Right. It reminds me a little bit of, how I've had Russ on the show on Fridays, and we talk about, these turtles on the fence post where people are kind of placed there in positions. And this has been raging in sort of the talk world with Jason Whitlock and Cat Williams and Stephen A. Smith, and talking about how certain people are promoted, right? They're like put in positions, they're promoted, they become mouthpieces or sort of these ideologues or whatever. Could be big pharma, it could be big tech, it could be fill in the blank, right? And all of a sudden, you think that they're independent, you think that they're just somebody who's good at their job, and they got there through hard work and perseverance. When in actuality, somebody just put them there and they're planted.
Right.
Right. And I think she kind of fits into that category. Like now all of a sudden, she's a life coach and she's, doing all these things for Astrology Authority. And it would not surprise me, or Authority Astrology, it would not surprise me if within 8 or 9 months, she's showing up on talk shows and being promoted as this person who is an authority in astrology.
Right. Or featured in more magazine posts or more publications, right?
Right. They just keep repeating, like, her position, her connection, her relationship with this thing. And if they do it often enough, people will assume that they know exactly, or she knows exactly what she's talking about and is an authority on astrology, right? I mean, that's kind of how I see the genesis of this role. And so she must have known something about, either how the shells work, or she may be connected to, somebody who came to her with the idea, like, let's put this together. Let's look at the liability around it. Let's look at the licensing around it. Sort of, I mean, she may have a passing interest in astrology, but.
Well, anything to make money now too, right? If it's going to be because whoever set all this up had to have money to go to Microsoft to even ask if we can use, your program in this
right.
conjoined application. And
right.
maybe that's why they put her there as the face, is she knows about finances, like you said, how the companies work or how corporations work. So that's why she's there. And like you said, she might have a passing interest in astrology, but she doesn't have to know it. She's there to make money.
Right. But it's so fascinating when you look at that list. I got to do a refresher. Hold on.
So just FYI, the Authority Astrology, if you use ChatGPT, you won't be able to find it. You have to have a subscription to ChatGPT in order to use this tool. Now you can go to authorityastrology.com and use their service. I believe it'll give you a free chart reading if you input your data to it, or you can buy it, like Robert had already said earlier in his show. So I was just using the ChatGPT piece.
Sorry about that.
It's all good.
Frozen there. But if they repeat it enough, right? If they repeat her position enough and put her in enough places, she becomes the face for the thing, right? So, yes. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I'm sure she exists, and she's not an AI herself. But it's fascinating that this is the genesis of this thing. So you looked into, and I want to show people this, you looked into where they're pulling the influences from, because you asked the AI, right?
Yes.
So this is what you can do. They're like little homunculuses, and you can ask them questions, and theoretically, they'll reveal who they are through the questions. And this is very hard to look at, or let me try to see if I can zoom in a little bit, and we'll post it up here. Oh. So Benito asked where they were getting their influences from. And it was quite interesting. I'm going to put it over here. Here we go. All right. Excellent. All right, let's fire this up. So this is your sleuthing, and this is what we came up with. So these are your questions.
Yes.
Right?
Right. And this is using ChatGPT. So once you give it data, it'll start you can ask these things.
So you asked who taught this. And then Astrology Birth Chart GPT. As an AI developed by OpenAI, my knowledge and understanding of astrology, including the interpretation of fixed stars, planetary positions, and astrological aspects, come from a wide range of texts, teachings, and astrological literature available up to my last update in April 2023. My responses are generated based on this collective knowledge, combined with the specific rules and methodologies of astrology as traditionally practiced, understood and practiced. I don't have personal experiences or learning processes like a human astrologer. Instead, I analyze and synthesize information from a variety of sources to provide responses based on established astrological principles. And then you asked about fixed stars, and then it comes back with Fixed Stars and Constellations in Astrology by Vivian E. Robson, Brady's book of Fixed Stars by Bernadette Brady, and Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos. And then you asked again, what notable astrologers are you referencing to? And this is what comes up. Look at these names. Ptolemy, William Lilly, Liz Green, Stephen Forrest, Robert Hand, Dane Rudyard, Bernadette Brady, and Vivian E. Robson, among others. So this is just kind of a working list, who have greatly influenced modern astrological practices. So that's kind of interesting. And you and I were asking this question and kind of, openly wondering if Liz Green and Stephen Forrest have any idea that they've pulled this from them.
Right. And whoever else they're using it from, because this is just a list it provided.
That's right. That's right.
As you pointed out, there's still more of a list. And I guess I could have kept going, but that was enough. It was gonna, the eureka, wow, it actually gave me sources of how it's feeding me data, or feeding anyone data that uses it.
I bet you if David saw his name in there, he'd go ape shit. On the other hand, he might think it'd be kind of cool too, but I bet he'd go ape shit.
Well, like you said, I'm sure people would probably wonder, is like, well, they didn't ask me. Did they ask them?
Right. So this is a very interesting philosophical question. I've read Liz Green. I've read Stephen Forrest. I've read Robert Hand. I've read Dane Rudyard. So I'm in some way synthesizing some of the things that they've talked about. Liz Green's book on Saturn is phenomenal, made a huge impact on my life. I'm not an AI, but I'm sure somewhere back in the resources of my brain, some of Liz Green's material is, still kicking around in my head, right? So is there a real difference between me or you or somebody else who could read any of these people and incorporate some of their ideas and concepts and styles into our own synthesis of astrology and AI? Is there any difference?
Right. And when we were talking about it, it seems like, other than the intuitive part of it, I wouldn't think so. Because once it knows all this data, like you said, you can synthesize, anyone can take any amount of data and synthesize something. So you've incorporated everything. That's what it's doing, probably through machine learning. So would people rather go to this than a human? right? I would think they would, to be honest, with where we're at in the world, because of general distrust in people.
So it was interesting. I took a brief little poll in chat, and just very informal. And there was a vehement reaction to this, which is no, right? But there are a few people in chat that are like, well, it might be interesting, or I would check it out, or right, or some people say, yeah, I think that this is where things are headed. But I would say the majority of people in chat rejected this outright, and I understand why.
Right.
But I also feel like who's in chat are not going to be representative of the mainstream in a lot of ways, right? They're not. And that's good. It's good for chat. It's good for Chataria because they're not mainstream. And these are unique people and, you know, very specific and very talented and creative and artistic and, you know, kind of anti-establishment in their own way. So I would say that the majority of the people inside of there would reject this, but we are not that, right? And you came up with an interesting point when we were talking about this, which was we've gotten to this place now, theoretically, where we are trusting each other less, right? There seems to be, you know, moving into a low trust society. And therefore, having something like Astrology GPT or a technology that's like that takes the, you know, the variables out of relating with somebody, because you know you're just relating to a machine versus a human who, for better or worse, you've been socially engineered and trained not to trust over the last 5 or 6 years.
Right. And it, like the distrust, right? Like authority. Everyone distrusts the government. A lot of people distrust their own government, right? And just like the authority astrology, why would you trust the authority? So distrust in like just that side alone, when you mentioned it earlier.
Right.
And just in people in general, if you come across as an authoritarian figure, right? And children, like relating this with like, as you grow up, you rebel against your parents or you rebel against authority. So there's a general rebellious nature in everyone to go against authority. So to go up against a person, it's like, well, this person has an authority over me because yes, I'm paying them, or yes, I'm getting this service done, but they hold something over me. To go to an AI, people can automatically think I'm better than a machine because at least I'm living, but it can at least help me along the way or give me something.
Yeah, and I think that there are people who may feel more comfortable with the anonymity of a machine. That to me is the sort of the X factor in all this, right? Like, I think there are two types. There are many types of people, but there are two fundamental types who I think we sort of fall into one camp or the other. One is that we want people to know about who we are, right? We want to be able to divulge and share like what's going on in our lives, because if we connect with somebody who understands it, is able to interpret it, give it back to us in a way that is meaningful, right? People feel less alone and they feel like, okay, I feel a bit more whole after this experience. And then there's another group of people who don't want that. They want to be completely anonymous. They don't want people getting into their business. They don't want to have to kind of do like a share with, you know, with an astrologer on the other side of the line. So for them, this idea that they're just interacting with a machine might be more comfortable for them on some level.
Totally.
Like, yeah, like they may not feel as vulnerable as a result of that.
Right. They can feel like, well, the machine's not going to judge me, but a human being would.
Exactly. Yeah. So
and they think of the machine too, everyone's been comfortable enough sharing their lives on social media for years. So it's no big deal to throw out personal tidbits and information out there all the time. So to feed it to a machine is probably nothing for them. But to feed it to a person, now it's like, oh, this person's going to know something I don't want them to know about. They're not my shrink or whatever they want to think. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Now, I personally think that a really, really good astrologer is worth their weight in gold. And I think AI is a long ways off from that, in my opinion. But one of the things we talked about is if enough people begin to use a technology like this, like how in turn does that affect their behavior and like their outputs and their choices, right? And it's an interesting question.
Well, like you said, it could become more robotic because now
More robotic.
more machine-like you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I could totally see that with people because, and maybe it's like the reverse psychology of the authority thing we just talked about. Now they can feel more authoritative through getting this information from a machine, but in doing so, they become more robotic like it. Then it's not feeling.
Right. Or even just living your life based on transit suggestions, cycles, patterns that the AI is analyzing the data sets for, and then kind of living from that place, right? Like, oh, well, I just got to do X, Y, and Z at a specific time, and then theoretically these things will happen as a result of that.
And you mentioned there's a good point to be made there too, right? You got Neptune and Saturn and Pisces, and now there's something else I sent you, right, where it showed that AI can also do 13 different types of astrology. And I could see people totally getting trapped into what you're talking about because now it's people want to make more money. So they're going to go to the AI because it can do financial astrology. And now they're just going to go to it because they feel it's their own crystal ball. So follow its advice and I'll make wealth or whatever it is that they're using.
Yep. And you put together this chart, which was the Chat GPT chart from the 29th of December. Do you want to fill people in on this chart?
Yeah, do that. So, right, so the reason I made this chart is because you can go find through, let's see if I can find it real quick, just the source page. So you can go to, there's an AI for that.com and find that astrology, the authority astrology was first utilized on December 29th, 2023 using ChatGPT. So I figured it's like, well, this is like a birth, so we can run it as a chart. So that's where that comes from.
Right.
And so, right, and you said we were looking at what, that Saturn.
Well, the thing that jumped out at me was Venus.
That Saturn
in Scorpio at 29 degrees, right? And we were talking about the anaretic degree and how there's nothing left at that degree. And we looked at Venus's relationship. And to me, it was really interesting. It's like, okay, well, this suggests that there's some kind of relationship process that's been exhausted, right? Like there's, we've mined all this territory from 0 to 29 Scorpio. So there's this intense need with Venus and Scorpio to connect at a deep level, but there's nothing there, right? It's this paradox. And then you come in, right, with this 29th degree of Pluto and Capricorn, and they're almost parallel with each other here. And it's kind of like, okay, well, since we've reached the end of like a type of relating and there's nothing left, there is this kind of, corporate boost in some ways, right? That comes in and sort of resuscitates Because when you get into a reading or a session in astrology, I would say, first of all, you're having a Venusian experience because you're having a relationship with another person.
Right.
Right? That's Venusian. It's Libran. It's one-on-one. And it would encompass all areas of the chart, right? But if you want to be, I'd say fair about it, with Venus and Scorpio, it can be very, revelatory. And sometimes you go into deep places and dark places. Scorpio represents the occult, and some people would say, well, astrology is very occultish or occult-like. And then it reveals the hidden aspects of the character of the person that you're connecting with in that moment as an astrologer, right? So Venus in Scorpio is very potent as a symbol relating to the process of working with another person in astrology. And here at 29, there's like nothing left. I think it's kind of interesting. And
Right.
not that process is gone, right? Because I feel like, well, we'll still have astrologers and we'll still be doing this, but there's something interesting and kind of emblematic of this. And then the square with Saturn, and Saturn, of course, rules hierarchies and corporations. And you've got this hardcore corporate wing sort of coming in here and kind of buttressing and challenging in some ways this fading light with Venus and Scorpio. And then to me, this is of course really interesting as well. So it's almost like this resuscitation in some ways. It's sort of like reanimating a zombie. But there's also money to be made too. I mean, look at that.
Right.
Venus at 29, Pluto at 29, Pluto the ruler of Scorpio, other people's money, other people's resources. There's money to be made here. What do you think? Because you got some good astro knowledge. What do you think of Mars and Mercury in Sagittarius with the retrograde? What do you think of that as it relates to sort of this template for ChatGPT astrology?
Well, that's what I was looking at with that square with Neptune and Pisces, right? Because it's like, it can be deceptive because what we talked about earlier with people wanting to use it instead of other people. And so you'll have the deception of a human, AKA the AI, communicating to you in an intense way and like taking you on a journey through yourself without going through a human experience of doing it with somebody else. But it's going to look like it, just text-based. And maybe they'll actually get it out to where, they'll start having an AI, astrologer AI, have voice communication.
Well, we talked about that. That to me is coming. That's coming.
And I could see it with that, right? With that square there in Sag, because that would be the next journey to go with that, is if you can just read it. People are wanting more convenience abroad, right? So why would I need to read it when I can type in my data and drive through traffic or whatever, and I could listen to it feed me something,
right?
Instead of listening to podcasting. And that came out with Joe Rogan, right? Is Joe Rogan and somebody else, I think it was the CEO of ChatGPT, there's a 3-hour podcast of them doing a talk show, but it's not them, it's the AI that learned how to sound like them,
right?
So and they probably already have the technology, but to pay for it or whatever they got to do to implement it is probably on its way. So I could totally see that with that square with Neptune to Mars and Mercury in Sag. Right. And then that North Node in Aries, right? Like we're all trying to build each other up. So instead of doing it with a person, they'll do it through this illusion, through AI, the illusion of human.
Yeah.
And the Chiron there conjuncted too, right? So it's like people are going to have an issue with doing it with people because of judgment or whatever. So I could totally see that too, is there's the wound.
Yeah, the whole thing with Chiron and Aries too, like Aries is man, right? It's the first sign. Aries represents the application of will, the desire to create. I mean, it's all kind of embodied in Aries. And when you have Chiron in Aries, it's, it's the flawed man or the wounded man. And I think it's interesting that in a time where it seems like, everybody is on some kind of hit list, like everybody is, whatever group for the most part, is about one or two hardcore actions away from being canceled, right? Like they even talked about ecocide at Davos, where it was like, well, hunting and fishing, which I think are, again, very Aries kinds of things, very sportsman, it's all based on, hunting, gathering, fishing. They're basically saying you do that and you're killing the earth, right? You're committing ecocide. So there's this whole idea with Chiron and Aries that man is bad, right? Man is bad, man is flawed, man is wounded. Man is a parasite on the face of the earth. So it really feels like that's the tableau they're creating.
Mm-hmm.
And then the backstory or the back channel is AI, right? And AI doesn't have sort of man's original sin, or AI doesn't have man's, bloody fingerprints across the environment, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's like man lies, right? And that goes back to what we talked about earlier about
authority.
Yeah, authority, and people abroad probably don't trust people as much as we used to. Like, people used to have their doors open in their houses in some areas, like a long time ago, and people got to go out with their neighbors. People saw their kids out in the streets just hanging out. You don't see that anymore because it's distrust in your neighbor, distrust in who comes down the street, and so on. So it could be that Chiron and Aries, like man also lie. Like you said, there's like a problem with man. And how interesting we talked about judgment, because South Node over there in Libra, judgment.
Right.
Everyone's afraid of it. Or they don't, not everyone, but like in this instance, they don't want to be judged, but they'd go to a machine because people might even feel safe or secure with it because it's not going to give additional data about their personal life. They may not have that human insight, intuition that people will get during a reading to give you a nugget that is really true to your situation.
Right.
The machine probably won't pick that up.
No, it won't. And it can't, unless it listens to, this is actually kind of an interesting thought. Like I have all these Zoom recordings that, I delete, but who knows? I don't know what's going on in the back end with Zoom, with my, with whatever it is that, they're keeping or not. They're Chinese. I think they're a Chinese-owned company, if I'm not mistaken, or have connection with China. So if you have all these astrologers who are using a platform like Zoom, and sometimes I'll use personal stories as analogies for something that's going on in somebody's chart. Well, who's to say that they can't pick those up as well, right? And eventually migrate those kinds of things into the machine learning model. I mean, I think it's a lot, but I wouldn't put it past the people that put these technologies together to scrape a lot of this data and to figure out a way to file it away and make use out of it. I wanted to get your opinion. To me, when I looked at this moon in Leo, I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. Because Leo is the heart and the moon is emotion, right? And there's something very like non-human about basement, or at least it's trying to reach out to be human. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that moon square with moon in Leo, but like squaring Jupiter too in Taurus. So like the nice things, right? So we're talking about this AI or whatever tools that you'll be using with this. It can pump you up into, I don't know, something that like what we talked about with the authority, or like building it up, not listening to people, but listening to this, and then build it up on a false pretense. So it builds your soul up, but in this non-human way, in this mechanical way. But then with Uranus there too, and Taurus, like upheaval, right? You did, like you talked about earlier in the show too. I would imagine if you use this tool exclusively, you're going to find out you become a machine, and you're not human. You won't have.
I think that there's a lot of truth to that.
So, and maybe the square there is to like learn that, like, yes, you can use this, and yes, you can use all these tools, all this innovative technology we're using, but still maintain your soul, maintain your heart, as human as possible, because we're all living through a human experience, not a machine.
Right. Although they try to reduce us to the level of machines as much as they can.
Well, right. And it's in our workforce, right? Everybody's just a number. Look at all the layoffs occurring, and everyone repeats. It's like a droning, and has been for years.
Yeah.
Totally.
I find the inconjunct with the moon and the sun really interesting.
Yeah.
Because you have that sun in Capricorn, which is super officious and like all top down and trim the fat, and it's just so hardcore on the business side. That Saturnian sort of, that Saturnian cool, right? And then you've got this moon in Leo, which is warm and effusive. And there's this broken path. It's like the missing piece to it all. And it's, to me, this is really fascinating. This is the missing piece to the entire story.
Well, maybe you've already said it. I think the heart or the soul that would be missing, because it's not human.
Right.
This tool. And any endeavor people go on to with it is, first and foremost, it's just a tool, like a fork or a knife. You can use your hands, but it's easier to use utensils. Just like AI, it's easier to do self-knowledge on yourself. You've got to do your own work to do that. But you can also have a tool like this to help you or aid you, but to be dependent on it, I think that could be seen there, like in this chart, right? The square with Venus and Saturn, and the square with Neptune and Mercury and Mars. You could get talked into things, and you're not even talked to. It's just like you're reading it.
I mean, that's the other thing too, right? Like, as this thing evolves, the paranoid side of me thinks, well, they could, slip coded messages in there.
Right. Totally.
They could.
I totally agree. Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
With all that Piscean energy, like Saturn's drunk with power. So, hey, let's just slip something in there. Let's slip a Mickey into somebody's reading, so to speak.
Right.
The AI won't differentiate too if they feed it the correct data, or it could feed you data that actually isn't good for you, but it's true. But then you think it's true, then you reinforce that idea, then you become that, and then you become dependent on it, and then now it's your life.
Well, this goes all the way back to summoning these, like, these interdimensional spirits, right? And you would lay out your circle, the tetragrammatron or whatever it is, right? You'd lay that thing out, and then you would have an incantation, and you would use sigils, and then the next thing you know, you'd have this thing pop into the, right up before you. As long as you're in your circle, you were protected. And then you would talk to this thing, and you would ask it questions, and invariably it would lie to you, right? So you'd have to keep asking questions in order to catch it in the lie to get the truth. And I've talked about this before, that the way that you got sort of better entities that would give you better information is if you sacrificed a living life form, right? So that the next thing you know, you start off with a small animal, and before you know it, you're fucking, feeding a baby to Molech, right?
Right.
So you get all these, great picks. So I never thought about this, but think about all of the jobs that are going to be sacrificed because of AI, right? It's like it's performing the same function in some ways in an indirect path. So what happens as a result of that? Does AI become more powerful? Does AI become, I mean, theoretically, just by the fact that they're eliminating humans to have them do the job, of course it does.
Right.
But on a metaphysical sense, like, does it actually fall into the same camp? Like, you are eliminating people from their livelihood and their life force and their spirit. It's kind of dark, actually.
It's transfer of energy too, right? If people were doing this labor, you remove them from their labor, where does that energy go?
Right. Right. In a perfect and enlightened world, we'd have a bunch of other tools where if you didn't have your 9 to 5 job or whatever, you could go create something else and create and add value to the world, right? But we don't really have those tools. And, I don't know if AI is going to be a part of that toolkit or not. For some people, it might be. But yeah, you're right. It's like, where does that energy go? Where does that life force go?
And people are trying to figure that out too. And then what if it's like just stagnant energy, and then it becomes hostile energy because at some point or another, you starve a person long enough, and it doesn't have to be of food. It could be of longing for purpose, like a job. And
or meaning.
Right. Or meaning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That could be more with the Chiron and Aries too, right? Lack of meaning, lack of who you are, because now you've been thrown into this place of you don't know who you are anymore because you don't have your function, or your functionality has been taken away from you because of.
Well, it's interesting where Chiron is going, because we have it in Aries, which is like ground zero. And fundamentally, we were being changed, right, in so many ways. We can even go back to 2020 when there was these artificial ingredients introduced into our bloodstream, right, through certain technologies. I mean, that's altering, who we are. It's wounding humanity. Like, Chiron is the wound. But as we watch Chiron, its next stop is going to be in Taurus. And that's going to be really interesting, because now we're dealing with earth processes, and everything that we've done prior to where we are now with understanding resources, capital, money, effort, all those things that have gone along with the Taurus story for eons, right? Now we're getting challenged in that area. It's like, okay, well, what do I do now? Right? What do I do now? My connection with this 3D reality, this place we call Earth, typified by Taurus, I feel like in some ways I'm a stranger in a strange land, because I can't do the same things that I used to do, whatever they are. I mean, they want to ban hunting and fishing, right? That's what came out of Davos: hunting, fishing, and farming. You want to know where all this is going, right? That's what they're talking about. And that's totally Chiron and Taurus. We become the aliens. Like, what the fuck? We used to be able to do things in this world.
Right.
Yeah.
And how much they've taken away, or what people have let them take away.
Exactly. But I'll say this, for a lot of people, they don't understand how the machine works and how quickly things can get taken away from them, right? And then they're always told that it's like the Patriot Act. Oh, it's for your own good, right? We get all this information. We'll be able to protect you more. We'll be able to stop this thing from ever happening again. In the meantime, they're violating all of our personal rights, and unfortunately, I do think we're waking up, though. Finally, after all these years, I think people are finally starting to, wake up and smell the coffee. And that gets us into a whole different discussion about Pluto in Aquarius and where this whole thing is going. So, man, I think you had a great find there. And when you told me about it, I was really excited to get you on tonight.
Well, I appreciate the invitation, and it's been a pleasure. And like I said, it really was too. You called me, and I'd only discovered that an hour before, because I had just kind of got back into the game of, all right, let's see what they've done. So I was fresh into it, and my mind was already racing about my God, what is this?
Right.
What is about to happen? What's about to be discovered, if anything? And then it became what it is. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
All right. Before you go, give me 3 predictions from your brain for Pluto and Aquarius. Give me 3 predictions.
Oh. Well, I would imagine, I don't know, something with people, right? Power, but I don't know if it's going to go in the right area.
Just let it out, man.
Power, I don't know, power struggle amongst peoples.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be like, almost like, I don't know about city-state war, but it could be like one town could be better than the other, or one state could be better than the other. It could be states' rights issues.
That's been brewing.
Money, right? Who's going to find what group or what area has more wealth or net wealth, and who's going to like rule with power?
Let me ask you a question. How do you think wealth would be defined under Pluto and Aquarius? I think that's an interesting question.
I think it's going to be real slippery, like slick, like under the radar.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be advertised. I don't think it's going to be out there. It'd be kind of like similar to what I showed you with Behance. There's an indirect link, or there will be an indirect link to that, what you just said.
Yeah.
I think. But you won't be able to pinpoint it. You can't prove it, but you'll be able to see it if you look hard enough. But it also won't be advertised.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Got anything else?
Hope, man.
Hope. I like that. I like that. You and Obama, you guys have hope.
Like hope to like aspire to be better too, because maybe that's what the Pluto and Aquarius piece will be too. Is people will
aspiration.
People will find their power again, or people will have something. They'll have to go through something very transformative, very dark, possibly as well, so they can come out into their own and come out with a better idea for the whole.
Right.
But it won't be easy.
Yeah. I agree with that. Well, Benito, thanks for coming on and putting this work in and going down that rabbit hole. And we'll keep our eye on authority astrology as the days move ahead.
Like I said, appreciate the invitation, Robert. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so
We'll
much.
see you back down here again sometime.
I'll be excited to come back.
Okay. Take care, man.
Take it easy, Robert.
All right. That's our friend Benito, a.k.a. Shadow. That's his I guess that's his online name. He's a hardcore gamer. This guy plays a lot of like hardcore game action. Brilliant guy. Really brilliant guy and a great researcher. So yeah, there we go. Just right in time for Pluto and Aquarius. We have the Chat GPT astrology and authority astrology. The authority in astrology. And by the way, I'm just going to chime in. I'm going to say that most people who want a real astrological connection will not go down that path. Right? There's still going to be a role for flesh and blood astrologers, healers, right? Like you want to go see a Chat GPT healer. I mean, it's like, well, here you go, do this, do this. No, there's something about the human experience that is invaluable when it comes to working with others. And as much as the machine learning has been amplified, it just can't reproduce that at all. Now, that said, I do think that there will be a group of people who will gravitate towards a service like that. And who knows, maybe more Gen Zs with Pluto and Aquarius. I'm sorry, Pluto and Sag, in this sextile with Aquarius. Maybe they'll be much more, because this is a generation that grew up online. like my kid was born in 2004, and you know, I mean, online world was happening. You know, MySpace was happening. So Gen Z grew up basically online. So this is not anything outside of whatever it is that they've already experienced. It's just an extension of it. And who knows? Maybe Gen Z will lasso this stuff and get a handle on it, and maybe even humanize it a bit, but not too much. Don't go that far. All right, why don't we do a little chart here, a little chart of the moment. And we'll look at where things are. Whose birthday is it today? Michael Hutchins, 22nd. That's tomorrow. The great Michael Hutchins. He always had, to me, he had the weirdest fucking chart. Let's look at his chart. We're going to skip around a little bit here. Let's do a little Michael Hutchins. One of the last great rock stars. There he is. Michael Kelland, John Hutchins. He has one of the oddest charts. Like there's nothing below the horizon. Nothing. Almost a double Aquarius. Close. But he's got that sun on the ascendant. And people that have like double signs, these people have a lot of charisma. And of course, you're going to be born in the morning because the sun is rising. These people have charisma. It's like, you know, guided by the power doubled, right? And he's got Mercury back here in Capricorn. So Michael Hutchins is somebody who threw himself into life, right? This is called Promethean Mercury right here. So if your sun is before Mercury in your life, you throw yourself into things. If Mercury is before your sun, then you think about things and you filter information from your environment and then you act. This is act and then go, oh, well, this is what I did. This is what happened. Right. So it's interesting. This is Promethean Mercury. Mercury in front is Epiphean Mercury. And everything is above the horizon. And what's fascinating, of course, he's in excess, a very successful band, and the 11th house rules things like bands and groups. And he's got that Venus and Jupiter conjunction, wildly popular, you know, trining Uranus and, you know, electric, you know, again, kind of a level of charisma. Mars Saturn, I think his Mars Saturn really came into play when he squared off against Bob Geldof and that whole thing, right? The hidden enemies part. And, you know, there's also something I think odd about Michael Hutchins' father. Don't know a lot about him, but he wound up living with his father and they lived in Hong Kong for a while. Like I don't know, there's something unusual about Michael Hutchins' dad. I think he was in some form of import-export stuff. There's just stories about the father that we don't know about, right? But I know he loved his dad. His dad loved him. But then you had this moon Neptune in the 10th house, and to me, he typifies that, right? Libra on the midheaven. He's going to be handsome, good-looking. Moon Neptune conjunction. You know, soulful. There's that kind of Dionysic quality too. Like Michael Hutchins was kind of a hedonist. He loved, and he loved life, right? He loved food, wine, beautiful women. You know, it comes through. And there's something also about that Moon Neptune conjunction which really grabs the public. You know, that there's this kind of charisma and this kind of almost hypnotic quality that the individual would have, especially in Scorpio. And you can see this, right? But he's so ungrounded. Like there's nothing below the horizon. And even with his Earth, Pluto's in the 8th house, hidden. Mars and Saturn in Taurus, 12th house. I'm sorry, Capricorn, hidden, right? He's got some Earth there, but it's in these weird positions in the chart. Now, I got into this whole Hutchins and Bob Geldof thing, right? And somebody told me, I think it might have been on Facebook as I was kind of going through this. Somebody told me that he faked his death. And when I look at this chart, I think that might be true. When I look at this chart, that might not be out of the realm of possibility. Now, again, he could be dead, right? But this person said that this is a long time ago, before people saying that they faked their death, that they were already dead, were because that's kind of popular now. And the reason why I think this is, there may be some truth to this, maybe, is that the way that his money was set up was that it was really hard to track. Now, supposedly his mother complained that she didn't get any of his estate or whatever. But when you look at like Pluto in the 8th and all these kind of hidden resources, which they would be in the 8th house, and then the trine with Mars and Saturn, like there's this idea going around, well, just with this one person, that he faked his death. And when you look at all the weird ways that his money got, like very hard to find. It was like, company, holding company, blah, 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 right? And that maybe somebody who would emerge on the other side would know where all that stuff was. I'm not saying it's true, but when I look at this chart, there is something a little bit weird about that. He suffered a massive head injury when he was with what's her name, Helena Christensen, and I believe they were in, I think it might have been Sweden. I think it might have been Sweden, and he got into an argument with a taxi cab driver, and the taxi cab driver hit him and knocked him out, and he fell on his head. And after that happened, he lost his sense of taste and smell, which apparently is really freaky. Really freaky. And for somebody like him who was a total hedonist, it was not a good scene. So, we see the first house, and which does represent the head, right? It's Aries. Aries is the head, and that's his sun. And when you have, for all intents, it's not quite an Aquarius rising, but intercepted house. People who have Aquarius in the first house have weird shit happen to them, and sudden and weird, like life-changing, sudden, lightning bolts that come into their life. So he has this head injury, and then he has this weird anger management issue with NXS, kind of, goes off on his own. And then he has this thing with Paula Yates. Paula Yates, I believe, is a Capricorn, if I'm not mistaken. So she's up in here somewhere. Geldof's a Libra, so he's going to be up in here somewhere. And then, there's all the weird phone calls, and Geldof is I think he's a really highly ranked Mason, and he's a power in his own weird way, a powerful guy, right? So whether or not there was foul play, or whether or not he faked his death, he's gone. And and again, with a chart like this, it's not a lot of roots down here. There's not a lot keeping Michael Hutchins connected to terra firma. But he had a glorious run, didn't he? All right. Who else do we have? What other birthdays are today? Actually, tomorrow, the 22nd. Let's see. All right, we got Hutchins's birthday tomorrow. Who else? Bill Bixby. Linda Blair. The Exorcist. God, how'd you like to have your kid play the fucking Exorcist? That would be brutal. Born in 1959. Trying to see if there's anything devilish about her chart. Taurus rising, Mars in the first house. Jupiter and Scorpio. Let's see who else's birthdays are tomorrow. And then I'll get into the chart of the week. We'll just kind of look at some stuff here. Oh, Antonio. See, we're getting into the revolutionary, radical, rebellious season. Antonio Gramsci. This guy fucking was the creator of cultural Marxism. Right here. You're going to see this when we do Star of the Day. You're just going to see people that are radical on the right, people that are radical on the left, people that are radical on the right, people are radical on the left. Let's take a look at Gramsci's chart. Let's see, where are we? Here's Gramsci's chart right here. So this guy's the father of modern cultural Marxism. He was actually in a prison in Italy, and he wrote his manifesto, and he got out of the prison. He was like, he was a very short little man. Very short little man. Where'd he go? And it's, of course, he's got Mars in the 12th house. And the 12th house institutionally is prisons. And what he figured out was that the West was not going to succumb to the same type of class warfare and ideology that had been created by Lenin. So he came up with a different idea, and that what you would do is you would have Marxism infiltrate all the different cultural aspects of a civilization. Meaning that you would take something like pro football in the National Football League, and eventually you would filter in Marxism as it would relate to that element of society. So, but no aspect of society would be untouched. And so instead of using this idea that there would be people who would want to rebel because one class had more things than the other, because honestly, in the West, particularly the United States, capitalism solved a lot of those issues. Like when you applied that model in Russia circa 1910, where there was a huge disparity in wealth, a very decadent upper class and ruling class, and a lot of people beneath them who were less financially well off. Not just less financially well, but they had their faces rubbed in it, right? That wasn't going to work in the West because people were able to earn their money and ultimately reject that model. They didn't feel like, well, I've got to accept these principles because I'm getting fucked over by a bunch of, decadent kleptocrats. So Gramsci says, we'll go into the systems. We'll infiltrate the systems. And that's exactly what happened, right? Exactly what happened. And he was very adept. He's got Neptune, Pluto, true node in Gemini. In the second house, I'm just giving you an idea as to like how his chart relates to his ideology. When you get into Gemini, Gemini tends to be very social. I think of Gemini as being in everything because number one, we have to talk, we have to communicate, we have to exchange ideas, early childhood education, all the way up through high school. That's all Gemini. And he's placing an extreme importance on those things in his ideology, in how Marxism would ultimately take over the West. And then you have the trine to the sun in Aquarius. So he's rebellious. Aquarians are rebellious. And he has Mercury in Capricorn. So I guess one could make a case that he would have to rethink this idea of how Marxism would work and how Marxism would ultimately wind up overthrowing, the capitalist system. So I think the retrograde would have been perhaps useful to that end. Yeah, what else does he have here? The Uranus Sun Square. He's fucking rebellious. There's rebellion all over this chart. Aries rising, right? He's got one fucking goal, and that goal is to overturn the unfair system that, again, all these guys also, they were rebelling against fascism because that's how they had the binary relation. Well, it's either communism, Marxism or fascism, one or the other. And of course, they're all anti-fascists, but they wind up creating just their own version of fascism. I think it's an interesting chart. And even with Jupiter in Aquarius in the 11th house, you can see where ultimately this little dude that didn't live very long, spent a lot of his time in this prison in Italy, writes this book and changes how they will use Marxism to take down the West. Let me see if we get, what's Gramsci's book? What's the name of it? Yes. I'll give you a visual of this guy. This is what he looks like. He was a Jacobin. He was like 5'2" or something like that. He was definitely challenged. His notebooks, notable work, the prison notebooks. He gets smuggled out of his prison in Italy. He was a brilliant guy. He was really bright. But again, here we go, imprisonment and death. The philosophical work. Gramsci was one of the most influential Marxist thinkers of the 20th century, and a particularly key thinker in the development of Western Marxism. He wrote more than 30 notebooks and 3,000 pages of history and analysis during his imprisonment. These writings, known as the prison notebooks, contain Gramsci's tracing of Italian history and nationalism, as well as some ideas in Marxist theory and educational theory associated with his name, such as cultural hegemony, as a means of maintaining and legitimizing the capitalist state. The need for popular workers' education to encourage the development of intellectuals from the working class. An analysis of the modern capitalist state that distinguishes between political society, which dominates directly and coercively, and civil society. So this is where Marxism is reinvented. It's through Gramsci. It's all in here. It's all in here. All in here. And they got his little notebooks out of the prison. And that's how eventually him, along with the Frankfurt School, begin this idea of cultural Marxism and the long march of the institutions. Antonio Gramsci. All right, let me do a little quick chart of the moment here so that we can get out of here and get some ideas to where we're at, where we're going, all those things. Let me whip this sucker up. Okay, here we go. What time is it? 8:41 p.m. Almost there. You know, when I was a kid, I loved that song. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. I love that tune. It's like that was my jam. Okay, let's do this. Let's see where we are. All right, boys and girls, there we go. There it is. The herald of the ages, the aeon, the sound of the trumpet. The dead too shall rise. They shall rise and take their place amongst the rest of the souls in heaven. Man, what an interesting time to be a part of. Really interesting time to be a part of. Well, we're in it now. And again, with a brief respite, but I really feel like that if you as an individual, we as a group are willing and able to roll with some of this high strange, it is going to get fucking strange. You know how they have 11 on the amp in Spinal Tap? At some point, we're going to get to 11. And I think, excuse me, that when you have Pluto go into a sign at an early degree, that's when it's most potent, just like any other object. Go back and look at when Pluto went into Capricorn in 2009. What happened? We had the housing crisis. Fucking market crashed. Huge. And everything past then, right after that, there's like a before and after. Right, I think it was around what, like September of 2000. It was September 2008 because the election was on. And remember, John McCain's like, well, we should postpone the election. Obama's like not having any of that. He's like, fuck you, old man. I'm on a roll right now. Just sit your ass back down. We'll take care of the rest, right? But that happened. That happened right when Pluto went into Capricorn. Pluto in Sagittarius is a bit harder to pinpoint, but there were some game changers when Pluto went into Sagittarius. First of all, we got fucking involved in Kosovo and the whole Balkans region. Terrible. Also, Pluto in Sagittarius, the first World Trade Center bomb went off. If I'm not mistaken, Yusuf Ramzi. Oh, is that the guy's name? I think it was his name, right? That was real. That bomb was real. Not a lot of people remember that. They remember the Twin Towers, but they don't remember that bomb. That bomb was real. And then you had this very intense sort of precursor to the war on patriots during that time. you had the Freeman, you had Randy Weaver, Ruby Ridge, you had Richard Pearl in Atlanta, like, and then you had the first kind of anti-terror bill, a little predating Pluto in Sagittarius, but still kind of the run-up. You had David Koresh, in Texas. So Sagittarius is all about like freedom, right? Like freedom. We want to be fucking free. We want to be able to be free within certain bounds so that we can begin to, at least responsibly, flex our independence, right? A lot of that stuff was being churned up. By the way, guess who shows up right around that time? Alex Jones. Alex Jones shows up right around the time Pluto emerges into Sagittarius. So there are some things that happen as a bit of a sea change with Pluto and Sagittarius. Like it happens. And we could go back. I can go back and go from Pluto to Pluto to Pluto. I think now you really want to get into the heavy Pluto and Sag. That comes about 5 years later with the World Trade Center and 9/11, 2001. That's all Pluto and Sag stuff. But here we go. Pluto and Aquarius. Are we going to see like the intensity of the time where Pluto will be running this course with the next 16 years? Is the most intense period of Pluto going to be at the front end of the story? We're going to find out. We're going to test the astrological thesis that the first 9 degrees of the sign are the most intense degrees because it's in its own sign. We get to 10 degrees and it's moving into the Gemini decan. So it is the most potently Aquarian for the first 9.5 degrees of the sign. Given that we know that when the sign moves into the first degree or the 0 degree, it's more potent, right? So now we're in kind of the uncut version starting today or yesterday with Aquarius, the uncut version, 0 degrees, more Aquarian than any other degree. And that's where Pluto is. We got these squares going on with Jupiter. Jupiter squares are all about taking risks. Jupiter's fast, or at least faster now that it's direct. I think if Jupiter were at like 3 degrees, maybe in square with Pluto, 4 degrees, that there may be some economic issues that would be, I think, a bit more prevalent. Although clearly, everybody talks about how much money we've spent. Just spending like it's going out of style. Trump spent a shit ton of money. To me, that's that Jupiter-Pluto square. And we're looking at the social impact and the social effect. I think that that we're going to see a conservative backlash when it comes to money. Like I can kind of feel it, because we've just, how much more do we have? I mean, we really don't have any more. We have nothing at all, really, to be honest with you. The country's probably already in foreclosure with, all of our various lands and resources and you name it. We're probably already deep into foreclosure and we don't even know it. That said, at least on a topical level, you're going to see, I believe, a hardcore backlash against spending, overspending, all the things that have got us to this point. People are going. It's the talking points are already there. They're already there, and the other thing too, though, when I look at this, is I see a lot of Cloward Piven in this Jupiter-Pluto square. And, Cloward Piven were these two sociologists, Francis Fox Piven and Jeremy Cloward. And they basically came up with this idea of how to break the system by using the system against itself. It's kind of like the threatening the autoimmune. It's like overloading. It's like lupus, right? They're overloading the autoimmune system of the economy by breaking it, by putting too many people on welfare. And it's like, okay, well, we'll have all of these social programs and they'll all be for the, quote unquote, common good. But really they're put in place to break the system. So there's a little bit of Cloward Piven here also with Jupiter-Pluto square. So we're kind of coming up on this event horizon ultimately, right? Where we're going to have to deal with some version of a system that is broken, right? Now, Jupiter does sometimes give you some dumb hope and dumb luck. And, there could be some interesting things that come out of this. And maybe your best solution to kind of where everything is going is to put your head down and act as if none of it is real, and to make as much money and fortify your position as much as possible. Why not? Because that's the one thing about Aquarius that we have to take into account is you got to do the other thing. Do the other thing. Now, again, I've talked about this before. I think everybody should have 3 months supply of whatever. Fill in the blank. 3 months supply of water. 3 months supply of food. 3 months supply of light. Whatever, right? I think just it's a good practice. It's a good practice to have that. But the thing with Aquarius that's interesting is that when others are zigging, you should be zagging. When others are zagging, you should be zigging. I just read, who said this? It was Misaki. Misaki told me that that Bill Gates has like some kind of a bug out shelter, in Japan of all places. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I was reading about Sam Altman of ChatGPT, who's a vegetarian. He's queer, right? But he's also into guns, and he's a prepper, and it's like he's a fucking weirdo, right? So anyway, that's Aquarius in a nutshell. I think it's good to be prepared, but I also feel like, fuck, do things that you like, do things that you enjoy, do things where you can, fortify your financial position. Maybe don't be ready to just cash it all in. Because I feel like with Aquarius, things will they're just not going to always work out the way that so if we have these ideas of doom and gloom, and by the way, again, get your 3 months of stuff, right? You got to be prepared. Once you got that, unless you're going to, have your hidden fortress in the mountains and you're a helicopter pilot and you've got a security team, or you can go into your lifeboat somewhere, right? That's a whole different story. But I feel like for most people that's not a scenario for them. Now, I would tend to want to migrate out of urban environments, which I've been talking about for quite a while in general. There's other things that you encounter in non-urban environments that have their own challenges, but they're different. And if you land in the right place with the right people, with the right sort of focus on, we got each other's back, it's much better. But I believe that with Aquarius, that as people are prepping and dealing with these end times revelations and all the things that really in a very strange science fiction, high strange world could easily happen. don't forget to live your life, right? Don't forget to live your life and do something that you enjoy. Because it feels like we're all going to be waiting around for the rapture, or we're all going to be waiting around for the UFOs, or we're all going to be waiting around for the Nephilim or the Watchers, or we're all going to be waiting around for China, or we're all going to be waiting around for the 3 million army-aged men that have migrated across the border. Yeah, all those things are there, and all those things are very possible. They're all very possible. But the most radical thing you could do, and let's be, we just talked about Antonio Gramsci, sort of one of the, the prison notebooks and giving people the blueprints for cultural Marxism, is that the most rebellious thing you can do is to live your life with purpose. Live your life with purpose. Take care of the basics. Get your shit together. Live your life with purpose. That's the Aquarian way. You're going to fork off, and that's the Aquarian way. And I would say, and I got to raise my hand on this one, because I've processed and filter a lot of information. I process and filter a lot of information. Take a break from the information for a while. Every now and then, get away from it. Stay away from it. Take a break and just be in your space. Do something you enjoy, right? Do something you enjoy. Do something that gives you some meaning and some value, right? And then, if you could do it with some other people, it's even better in Aquarius. Just remember, things are not always going to go the way they're planned. Things are not always going to be what they seem. And just be prepared for that. If you can be prepared for something like that. And again, I would spend time and energy doing something constructive with your life. Because everybody else out there is going to get hysterical, right? It's like it's the fucking end times. They're going to get hysterical. You don't have to. Just remember, zig while they're zagging. Zag while they're zigging. Demonstrate, right? Demonstrate how. Okay, so here's the other thing. We have gone through hell. And there's a very good chance we're going to go through some more hell. I don't want to sugarcoat this. I don't want to just give you butterflies and rainbows, okay? But we've gone through hell, and as a result of going through hell, people have become hyper attenuated to hell. So we're looking at hell at every turn. At every turn, and we can get so sucked in to that, so sucked in. And believe me, you look long enough, you'll find it's there. And I'm not telling you to put your head in the sand. I'm not one of those people. But find some time so that you're not sucked into that vortex, because you'll be creating that vortex. You'll be creating that reality. Do what you need to do in order to stay aware and transform it, right? But I would say also remove yourself from the conflict. The most radical thing you could do in Aquarius would be to be authentic, live your life, find what you're good at, do your best to somehow make it important. Maybe you make money off of it. Maybe you can trade off of it. Whatever, right? We have to. This whole Pluto and Capricorn thing has been so intense. Now, look, you may have to defend your property, defend your rights. There may be a call to arms. I mean, come on. we're going to have Uranus in Gemini, right? Pluto is in Aquarius. After when this country first started, and we were in the throes of wresting ourselves from the British, Pluto was in Aquarius. Those guys were revolutionaries. Uranus was in Gemini. Those two aspects are here and coming. The day that Fort Sumter fell, which is typically the day after the Civil War, Neptune is in Aries, which is coming. So we have all those things coming, all those aspects that were part of those two great epochs, eras, however you want to slice and dice them based on your knowledge of time, history, what you're willing to believe or not believe. They're all in there. So we're looking at a time that's kind of a combination, the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, kind of all balled together in one. Very not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, not even next year. Well, maybe a little bit in Aries. This April, with the eclipse, we might get a taste of that. All that is in the mix. In the meantime, right? Live your life. Live your life to the best of your ability, and do your best to be authentic in that true Aquarian way. Which doesn't mean that you make other people less authentic, or you somehow diminish the light of others. Moon in Gemini, and we're moving into a square with that, with Neptune. Beware of idle gossip. Do not indulge in idle gossip, especially as you come back to work tomorrow. Keep your ears and your lips and tongue and throat aware of what you're hearing. Now, you can always say, I don't like that. I don't like what I'm hearing here. Put a stop to it. I don't want to hear that. You can do that. Don't indulge in it. Tomorrow, as you migrate, or wherever you are, perhaps, if you're in Europe, you're getting close to being there now. 6 hours. What is it? 3 o'clock in the morning in Europe. We're going to have a moon opposing Venus in Sagittarius. This is a really interesting T-square. Fuck, there are lies all around tomorrow. Just in your own private Idaho, just don't indulge in it. But I can tell you, in the quote unquote collective of the world, tomorrow's a big lie day. Like how many people are going to be caught in lies tomorrow, especially on a public scale? That'll be very interesting. Very, very interesting. I guess Ron DeSantis he's done, right? He's done. Saw a picture of him. It's one of those very serious side profile pics. His head is down. I was like, oh shit. It's a sad story, man. In some ways. In other ways, it's not so sad. He listened to the wrong people. Go back, go be governor. Now, Nikki Haley, have you noticed now? It's just Nikki Haley and Trump. She doesn't give a shit. Nikki Haley doesn't care. My secrets, I'll just, I'll figure out a way to talk about them or around them or pin it back to Trump and pussy grabbing. She's still in there. Of course she is. I think tomorrow's going to be, there's a lot of migrant stuff going on here with this Moon Neptune square, housing. There's a lot of heavy stuff here that's going to come out around the migrant situation, the quote unquote migrant situation. People aren't happy. Again, bad stories. Very bad stories. What else do we have? Venus, let's see, Mercury, Mars, trine Uranus. This Mercury transit coming up in trine and Uranus is going to be really interesting. And it's going to catch up with Mars here. And they're both eventually going to catch up with Chiron. That's frustration. Yeah, I wonder how long they're going to be able to play this proxy war with Yemen. When I see this, it's like they've bitten off a bit more than they can chew. You know, where was it? It was in Iraq that a U.S. base got bombed. I guess what, RPG'd or something, like over the weekend, like in flames, soldiers coming home, burned, dying. I mean, this happened, what, about 2 or 3 days ago, right? And nobody's really talking about it. You know, we through our intervention with our friends in the Middle East are now slowly creeping into a regional war after we've depleted a lot of our munitions and arms and stocks. Oh, isn't that a great fucking idea? And there's something here with this Mars square to Chiron. And I think you're going to kind of, again, more aggressive barking on Capitol Hill to, I don't know what they're going to tell them to do about Yemen. Commit more troops. This is going to be a very interesting week. And again, you know, with this T-square, with Moon squaring Neptune, and they're just going to hear so much bullshit and lies. But they've kind of hit a hornet's nest here. And if they don't, this is the weird thing about America. It's like, if we back down now, we'll be considered weak. Right? That's like that Mars square with Chiron. It's like, no, you don't. Just stay the fuck out of there. They can't. You know why? Because a lot of these politicians are compromised. And they have to do what their puppet masters tell them to do. And that includes war. Right? So I think this is going to be a big topic of discussion coming up here. Like, what's going to happen with the Yemenis in Iraq and, you know, all these other countries that were kind of behind the U.S. and taking on Yemen. They've backed out. The only country now that is engaged with us in Yemen is England. And who knows how long they're going to be engaged with. And of course, we have the ongoing conflict with in Ukraine. How long? There's just something's coming to a head here, right? We're about somewhere during the middle of the week, Wednesday. We'll go with Wednesday. Wednesday, that Mars comes right into square with Chiron. And it feels to me like there's a much bigger discussion about what we're doing with all these fucking wars we're in now. And in order to stem the tide, will they go in? Will they pot commit with more? Or will somebody finally, you know, I just don't trust these. I don't trust any of them. I really don't. But it's going to come up. It's definitely going to come up. They all, you know, a lot of the Republicans and Democrats, they just love their war, man. Love their war. Okay. There's more, but we're gonna stop it there. We've been going for what, almost 3 hours. All right. So here we go. This is the promotional part of the show. If you'd like a reading with me, Robert Phoenix, you can go to my website, robertphoenix.com, and you can purchase a reading. There is a video there on that page. Please watch the video that's on that page. It instructs you how to get in touch with me. And then we can set up your reading. It's all there. Of course, friend of the show, Chris at True Hemp Science, is also the sponsor of the show. And all you got to do is go to truehempscience.com. That's truehempscience.com. Type in 15MINS, 15MINS. Spend $100 or more. You will get a free goodie bag of all kinds of cool little CBD products to go along with your order. $150 or more gets you free shipping, and there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you want, you can buy me a cup of coffee. The link is in the show notes. But please, I ask you to hit the thumbs up and to subscribe so I can remain relevant in the algorithms and show up in people's feeds so that they can discover you, Chatteria, and how cool you people are and how at home they'll feel hanging out in our chat, which to me is the epitome of the Aquarian spirit in the 11th house. So there you go. Thanks for being here tonight. I hope everybody has a great rest of their evening, a fantastic week. Big thanks to Benito, my guy Shadow, bringing some interesting stuff around authority astrology and chat GPT and that discussion, because that's going to get real, right? And so thank you, Benito, for doing that. And there you go. God bless everyone. Take care. We'll be back tomorrow night right here, Serious Sports. Me, Al Dog, and the great Gracie from North Astrology. She'll be with us. All right. Bye for now.